March 21st, 2024 meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. The purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the City Administrator in matters affecting renters in the city. The Ann Arbor Renters Commission is made up of voting members who are appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council, 2 non-voting City Council liaisons, 2 non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, and a non-voting representative from the University of Michigan Student Legal Services. There will be a couple public comment opportunities, and the instructions for that will be given during those periods. But you can watch through the web link at a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. The first letter of each word is capitalized. Okay, moving on to roll call. Item 2. So as always, please state the city or state that you're calling from. I am here. I'm calling from Ann Arbor. Commissioner Chen is not here. Let me just check. Oh, Jeff is here. Okay, Commissioner Kelly is absent. Commissioner Droppelman.
Present in Ann Arbor.
You know what? I am having, as always, some internet problems. I apologize. I'm going to switch over. Well, I'll finish roll here and then I'll switch over to another network here. Commissioner Else.
I am here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lowe's.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Hello, Commissioner Tibbetts.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Rosen is not here. Commissioner Ratcliffe.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Commissioner Thomas is absent. Commissioner Pitts.
Here, Ann Arbor.
And Commissioner Good.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Welcome. And Councilmember Redina.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Harrison is not able to make it, so let's see. Okay, we do have 6 voting members from my count, which means we do meet quorum. Okay, we can move on to item 3, approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll
So
move.
moved.
Okay, moved by Rosanita. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. Okay. All those in favor of approving our agenda, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, great. So we've approved our agenda. Now we can move on to item 4, approval of our minutes. This is the minutes from our last meeting, which was on February 15th. Do we have a motion to approve last meeting's minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Julia. Do we have a second?
Yep.
By Jamie. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, so we've approved our minutes. Now we can move on to item 5, the first general public comment.
Right. Public comment can be made by phone at 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and entering meeting ID 935-8080-1941 or by joining with the web link, and that is a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. You are calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand. If you are joining with the link, you can use the raise hand feature. If you'd like to address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes, go ahead and raise your hand. There are no attendees.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, we can move on to item 6, old business. We'll begin with 6-A, discussion of attendance and appointments. So I can give an update here. So a group of us were emailing. We did receive, this is our council member liaisons, myself and our vice chair, Julia. We were emailing about proposing some recommendations for appointments to our empty seats and our my seat as well, which will be empty soon. We have not yet submitted those recommendations, but I think our goal, I think a reasonable goal is to have those positions filled by our next monthly meeting. But I'll open the floor here if anyone has questions, comments on this issue.
I'll share that two people emailed me to ask about how to apply. I don't think that they've applied yet, but it's been in the past couple of days, this week, at least, if not yesterday.
Thanks. Travis?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think I saw that the clerk's office shared out that there were vacancies for Renters Commission on social platforms. And obviously, if folks here have people in their network that they could reach out to and share it with as well. We had to do some personal outreach last time we had vacancies to make sure that we were getting a diverse pool of applicants and also folks from kind of different backgrounds and perspectives that could be represented here. So if there is a perspective that you feel is missing, please make sure to reach out to those candidates and ask them to apply. And then I agree with Zachariah. I think we're looking to move forward here quickly. I will note that it is a two-step process at council. So the mayor would have to recommend and then at the next meeting appoint. So we even with our effort here, it will likely be very close to the next meeting before they are officially confirmed.
Thank you. Rosanita?
Besides the attorney vacancy, how many other vacancies are there currently?
I believe that there's one current vacancy for a voting member, if I'm not mistaken, and we have one member who hasn't attended in some time, and I don't believe he's officially been removed from the commission yet, but he will be soon. And then myself, so that would be soon.
So do we need to have a motion to remove the person who doesn't attend?
I think with the timeline of reappointments, I think, and also with the timeline of trying to appoint a replacement, I think that you could do that, or we could leave it as not seeking reappointment.
Because
Thank
when
you.
would his slot be up for reappointment?
I believe that the term ends in May, and that reappointment process is starting. It's kind of going on right now. Folks are submitting their applications to kind of request to be reappointed, and I haven't heard anything. So either way, I think is fine.
I'll let you go first, John.
Are you thinking about removing people or recommending that they be removed? Because I've got the bylaws in front of us, and 4.6 says that their members are expected to attend regularly scheduled meetings. If they miss more than 3 regularly scheduled meetings in a 12-month period, the chair may notify the mayor and may recommend removal of the member. And then, consistent with the city code, a member of the commission may be removed for cause by the mayor with approval of the city council. So that's the way to do it, unless you have a discussion with somebody and they realize that they can't do it and they just step down.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Since this is the chair, I'd be happy to send an email and CC you, Kristen, on that.
Perfect.
I guess it'll probably just be done at the same time that the new people are appointed. Rosanita, then Jeff.
If the, let's see, if it goes before council, then would it be even occur before, I guess, the the person's term ends? If, like, timing wise, I don't know. Is it
I
one
think
meet?
it would be close. I think the mayor would also have to decide to put that on the agenda. And so that's not guaranteed, I guess. So I think the timeline is close. Happy to move forward with it. Because he may put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I think the group of us who are emailing, that's our council members, Julia and I, we can take a look at the timeline for the appointments. And if it makes sense to try to remove the commissioner and rather than just let their term expire, then we can recommend that. Otherwise, we'll just let it expire and appoint somebody. Jeff?
My suggestion was just going to be, depending on when the person's term expires, we might want to expedite it. Just if we're going to, if the city council is going to be making appointments, we might want to free up the space sooner rather than later, depending on when the term expires, and possibly do them all at once versus piecemeal.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I think it might have to be, well, we'll email and we'll talk about it, figure out the best plan, but I'm not seeing any opposition to potentially moving this person if it means someone can join the commission sooner. Okay, is there anything else on this point before we move on? Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move on to 6-B, plan future commissioner education opportunities. So tonight, obviously we have Avalon Housing to come to present. There was a number of suggestions that were made. I'll just open the floor and hear from all of you if there are particular ideas that you want to explore for education opportunities. That's for us. Rosanita?
Since they're, I guess, I don't know if they're, I'd like to know more about the Ann Arbor Tenants Union. I know that I've seen interviews or read interviews now, and so it seems like it's past the beginning of the initial organizing stage. So I'd just like to get brought up to date as to what's going on with that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I am involved in the tenants union. I can ask some other members and see if we can arrange something. I know there's a lot of history with the old tenants union, which went defunct, I think, in 2004. And actually, Julia was a member of the old tenants union, which I'm sure she can give us enlighten us on what it was like to be involved back then as well. But I'd be happy to reach out. Also, I just want to confirm that there was the Santa Barbara County Ombudsman.
Right. Yeah. It's the tenant landlord ombudsman.
Okay.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I was planning on moving forward with inviting them as well and CCing you, Rosanita, if that's okay, since you proposed it.
Okay.
Any other ideas? Let's do Jamie, then Rosanita.
Yeah, I would be curious. The only organization I'm familiar with, at least in Ann Arbor, related to tenants with disabilities is Michigan Ability Partners. But I think that's an area that I could use a little more education on. Issues that those renters may be facing. Maybe Rosanita has a suggestion related to that too with your work that you do, but
Go ahead, Rosanita.
I had to unmute. Um, there's Michigan Ability Partners. I mean, the city itself gives out its own specific set of, well, HUD vouchers, the non-elderly disabled vouchers, and the NED Category 2 vouchers as well. And I know that Councilmember Ghazi Edwin is working on something with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission or Corporation, AAHC. I can never get the whole name right, about listing or having a master list of like accessible units, which is a huge issue, not just in Ann Arbor, unfortunately, both private and, like, was it both small landlord and rental homes, like actual, single family houses, but also within apartment complexes as well. And the affordability aspect of that. Is it the disability network of, is it Monroe, Washtenaw, and Lenawee County? Is that right? I just know the initials. They're also another resource as well, to know a little bit more about what's going on with people looking at renting and the problems that they're having within the city. And possibly looking at, was it barrier busters as well would be, I think, a good idea, not just for people with disabilities, but in general. And then separate from that, I was curious about the cooperative because I know they spoke at one of the city council meetings. They were in the M Live, and they were talking about possible rezoning to bring up, to be able to repair or some of the houses that they have. And that's one of the, to me, I think it's really important to know what's happening with that because that is one of the alternative affordable housing solutions that we have in the city, beyond a private developer. Well, it's a private for-profit developer. And I know that both, it's not just for students, that there are some non-students who live there as well.
A lot of great ideas. Thank you, Rosanita. Oh, did you just put your, okay, yeah.
Technical error.
Are any of these organizations, in your opinion, this is a question to everybody, should they be prioritized and trying to get somebody to come and talk to the commission? I would also love to have someone from Planning Commission come and talk. I think that's very relevant to the the planning that they're currently engaging in, comprehensive plan. So I would also like to add that to the list. But if I'm not seeing anyone say that there's a particular one you want to hear from first. So in that case, we can just start sending out invitations and planning them for different months throughout the year. Okay. Heard that. Great. Anything else on Commissioner Education? Okay. We can move on to 6-C. This is the last item before our presentation from Avalon here. I guess I will ask Travis if you want to introduce this, since this is directly related to City Council's work. This is regarding the amendment. Oh, I think there's some issues here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what exactly is going on. That's all right. So City Council just early March. Oh, he has having some technical issues, I guess. He just sent me a message. So earlier this month, the City Council did amend both sections 8530 and 8531, also known as the early leasing ordinance and the right to renew ordinance. They combined them into one, one ordinance, which I think clarifies the language. It simplifies that timeline that was involved, and it also addresses and closes some of the loopholes that we have discussed in the commission. We have looked at this language before, but I thought I'd just put it up here. It's important to know that this took effect as of March 14th. And actually, John, I have a question for you. Does this affect only leases that will take effect after the ordinance is active? Or does this affect? Go ahead.
So if you go to the very beginning under 8530, the new one under 8530, 1D as in dog. That's it. So and a couple things. One, under B, you'll see 8 months total duration, and that was to get around the people that do the 6-month skirt, where they do a couple 6 months. So that's intended to address that. And so it applies to leases entered into, renewed, or renegotiated after the effective date of this section. And this section went into effect on March 17th, 2024. So that's when it goes into effect. So it's into effect now. So if a lease is being renewed or renegotiated, it's going to go into effect. Now,
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm just curious, if a lease were signed on March 1st, but didn't start until September 1st, would this still affect that lease? Because if the lease were signed, entered into,
it's already entered into, no. So it would affect it for the next year. But if it's already entered into, then you'd already have the lease, presumably, for that September start date.
Right. But that lease, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. Yep.
And then if you go down to under 2B, there's some changes there. What was added here was the price of rent and any fees, because remember this, one of the complaints, they added parking, they kind of snuck it in under the radar and the tenant didn't know it till later. And then that's also a list of changes in the terms and condition of the current lease. And then we asked for the date by which the landlord requires the tenant to accept the offer. So we kind of tightened up 1 through Roman numeral 6, even though there's 4, 5, and 4. If you know how to count in Roman numerals, looks like there's a little scrivener's error. If you see what I'm talking about.
Right here?
Yeah. So you
Yes.
see 4. You see
Yep.
how it goes IV, and then V, and then IV again.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Was that Just an error?
Obviously.
Okay, okay, gotcha. It's a little confused there. All right. Should someone be notified of that error?
Yeah, I'll let Jackie, the clerk gets this up to Unicode, so I'll let her know.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
They might catch that automatically, but
Right.
Kristen and I can reach out to Jackie Boudry, the clerk.
Yeah. I do appreciate that. And that instance where the tenants had a $100 a month parking fee tacked on, and they didn't know about it until the last moment before they signed. It was actually just notified that they successfully negotiated that out of their agreement. So that's I was very happy to hear that they were able to get that reversed. Okay, I'll open the floor here. Any comments, questions about this change?
Kristen Vanderluck has been working on a one-page guide. We're gonna update the complaint form to capture better data that'll help Pete Held and Janet Farrell who review these. And then she's worked on a one-page guide that a draft will be ready to be sent out pretty soon because it goes into effect. So
awesome. I thank you very much, Kristen. Hopefully this last time this law is touched for a good amount of time, but I really do appreciate that I noticed you guys took down the old guides very quickly. That was quick thinking, and I really appreciate that. And I'm excited to see the next guide. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to help as a volunteer. Jordan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Kristen. I was curious as to if we were getting that out, when we would get that out. So it sounds like soon. And then my second thing is, I think some of the feedback and commentary on this change has just been how crucial this next step of the waitlist fees and things are, right? Like how much we really need to get movement on that. I think we've all been getting stories of how much money people put in holding, and there's some of those in the communication. So I can kind of I know some of those cases personally, can kind of expound on some of them too when we get to that point, but I think I just want to reinforce that the holding deposit, right to lease, whatever they're calling all of those things, this just has highlighted why, if we're giving this specific time frame, how it's an even bigger deal, the fees that people are taking and catching, and how quickly we need to get on that. So thanks everybody for working on that part too.
Thank you, Jordan. Rosanita?
Just piggybacking off of what Jordan said, thank you to Kristen for getting right on everything. With the form that the complaint form, is there a question on there for prospective tenants about the waitlist fees? Just so that we're somehow capturing that data?
There
Or
isn't right now, but I think that is definitely something we can discuss, John, with Janet when Janet is back too. Definitely.
Thank you. Yeah.
I know that Student Legal Services has been collecting information on this. This has largely affected student tenants, not only, of course, but they have quite a few documents and a list of landlords engaging in that behavior, in those policies. I know also that the tenants union is collecting some, and if the commission ever needs examples, I'm positive that we can turn to those sources and get some. Rosanita?
I just think that it's great that those two organizations and possibly others are collecting that data, but I think as a commission, we're talking about the fees, and as we know, the council members are also talking about junk fees and an ordinance, that having that data and starting to collect it would be really great to have on the city side, so that we know specifically what all those different names are that they're calling those fees, which would be, I think, helpful to the ordinance. And also, like, just the ranges, because, we've seen from the communications, it runs the gamut. So, yeah.
Totally agree on all those points. Okay. Any other oh yeah, go ahead. Travis.
And it let me unmute this time. Sorry about that. The only thing I wanted to add on to that, Commissioner Ratcliffe, is that we are hoping, and I say this knowing that John is the one who will have to do some of the writing, but it is our hope, obviously, that it doesn't really matter what the landlord will call the fee, that we will write this in a way so that they can't simply change the name and then get back to charging again. And so, but certainly, I think always looking for more data, and obviously as we make some ordinance changes and actual official complaints come in, that will be some substantial data that we can maintain as well.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else on this note? This item? Okay, we'll be looking for that information sheet. Kristen, let us know if there's anything we can do to help. And I really did like the original one that you guys had made. Hopefully you can recycle some of that format or some of the material anyway. Okay, we can move on to new business. That's item 7. Let's begin with item 7-A. We have a presentation from Avalon Housing. I'm really excited. I'm very grateful that they've come here today. So I just promoted Scott to panelist. Hi, Scott. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me. I think I'll kick it off, it sounds like. It's good to see some familiar faces. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Ellis. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Mission Advancement with Avalon Housing. And I'll go into who Avalon Housing is as a nonprofit affordable housing developer and service provider here in the community. But first, I kind of want to touch on why we exist. So let me see if I can share my screen. I think this will work. Okay. Do that. Okay. And if everyone can see that, we'll kind of get into it. So I think a lot of this first information won't be new to most of you, that there is a housing crisis here nationally, and it's been going on for a while. In Washtenaw County, these numbers are from 2021, but there's definitely a large number of individuals who are experiencing homelessness here in our community, and it definitely disproportionately impacts our Black neighbors and folks of color here in the community. And this is due to many systemic injustices, especially around the housing space, history of redlining in our county and other places. And that's part of what Avalon Housing is here to address. More recently, these are the numbers from last year, or kind of the jump and spike in homelessness, especially for families in particular, between 2022 and 2023. This is ongoing, and we're still seeing it today in 2024. So how did we get here? The root cause of a lot of this is simply the lack of housing, the lack of affordable housing, the lack of housing at all levels, but especially for what we consider affordable. And these are based on HUD and other data. So a home is considered affordable if it costs less than 30% of household income. Here in our county, in Washtenaw County, more than half of renters spend more than 30% of their incomes on housing. So kind of going back to Avalon and who we serve in the community, we have over 800 clients, tenants here in the county. Around 200 of them are children and youth. And the majority of them are living on less than $800 a month. So kind of the average household income for our tenants is about $10,000 annually. The majority of folks that we are working with are exiting literal homelessness into our affordable housing developments. And we do work with lots of folks who are experiencing high needs as they're navigating mental health issues or other issues due to what they've been experiencing, or that's part of why they experienced homelessness in the first place. And so we come alongside them with wraparound support services. And that's a part of our approach. Move something out of the way. So Avalon Housing follows the Housing First model. If you're not familiar with what Housing First is the concept that this is a nationally recognized model for addressing homelessness, basically saying that if somebody has an issue that they're navigating, mental health, physical disability, or something like that, it's so much harder to address that if they are living unhoused. And so getting them into safe and permanent housing is the first step in addressing that. And that's when you can come alongside them and start to address all their other basic needs. And we pair Housing First with what's called supportive housing. And so that's all the wraparound support services that help navigate whatever those issues are. And I'll kind of list some of those out here, what those support services look like. So we have 24/7 crisis response for our tenants. We can assist somebody getting to appointments. We have peer support groups. We have on-site medical care with our partner with Packard Health. We can help somebody manage their medication, and we can support somebody navigating legal issues or just other systems in general that they might be navigating here in our community. Right now, we have 29 properties throughout the county. So we're not just in Ann Arbor. We have properties in Chelsea and Dexter, and we are going to be building a new property in Ypsilanti as well. And then we work with lots of tenants who are using vouchers and living in market rate apartments with local landlords. And so when we opened a recent property that's called Hickory Way, which is 70 units in 2021, the majority of those folks were exiting emergency shelter straight into that housing complex. And when that happened, that decreased chronic homelessness in this county by 30%. So when we open these new properties and these new developments, we are able to take a big bite out of the homelessness crisis here in our community. These are just some of the numbers of folks that we are able to exit from homelessness into permanent supportive affordable housing when we lease them up each year in our properties. Going back to that Housing First model, so for folks who are using Housing First, the retention rate, so retention rate being how many folks stay housed once they get housed, is 84%. When Avalon combines its supportive services and wraps around folks with all those different support services, we hit 96%. So the vast majority of tenants that we house stay housed. And we started in 1992, and so there are many folks who back then moved in or over the years, and they're still living with us, or they eventually might pass away even as they age in our properties. So we are permanent supportive housing. We are the long-term home for people in our community. And I just want to move on to a couple of our upcoming properties. Some of those you might be aware of. And this one is already under construction. And so this is the Grove at Viridian, which is right there behind County Farm Park on Platte Road. And we started construction in the fall, and we plan to lease up in summer 2025. So this will be 50 units, mostly families, 50 units for us. In this case, that means kind of 114 bedrooms, basically. The next is Catherine Street property, 121 Catherine, right there in Carytown. And we are very close to breaking ground on this property. And this is a collaboration between us and the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. So that's kind of a 51%, 49%, where the 49% ownership of the property. And that's another unique thing about Avalon is that we are both the developer, the property manager, and the service provider in a lot of our properties. And then whether that's housing commission properties or with local landlords, we will then become the service provider for folks. And the next one is 206 North Washington. This is in Ypsilanti. This will be 22 units of supportive affordable housing, and we are breaking ground there pretty soon. We have, there's a building that kind of burned down a while ago, and so we have acquired that property from the city. And then we are going to add on to what we call our Hickory Way complex there on South Maple with another additional 38 units of supportive affordable housing. And construction will start most likely next summer. So for folks, how do you become housed with Avalon Housing? We get referrals via HAWK, so the Housing Access of Washtenaw County, through the coordinated entry system. That's kind of the way it works for anyone who wants to live in an Avalon property. They have to go through that system just like everybody else. We don't choose who we work with necessarily. Some of the other things we do kind of with our tenants is all sorts of community building activities, arts programming, athletic programs, support programs for youth. We have food pantries at 5 sites throughout the county, basically. And those are open not just to our tenants, but to local community members as well who might be needing them. We have community gardens. We have a tenant leadership program. And so some of our tenants are not just in that tenant leadership program, but are also full voting members of our board of trustees as well to provide leadership and guidance for their organization. Yeah, here's what some of those are. And so if folks want to get involved and support Avalon, volunteering is one way they can do that. And so that's at the pantries, service projects, in our arts program. There's all the ways to do that. That's all obviously on our website on how to engage with us that way. And because of the audience that I have today and what's going on right now with some interest in the public safety and mental health millage, I do want to highlight how some of the public safety and mental health millage that might be up for renewal or change this fall is directly benefits tenants living in our community. So if you're not familiar with what that millage is, the dollars are low, mostly via the county, but for any entity like the city of Ann Arbor or others who have their own police force, the public safety portion of it, they are getting a rebate because they're not using the sheriff's services in the city. And so Ann Arbor has chosen to use that rebate and support the Housing Commission properties via services. And so Avalon is the service provider for those services, including mental health support, medical care, the food pantries, all the things we've been talking about. And so basically that mental health and public safety millage, one portion of it is supporting 186 individuals and family households living throughout the Ann Arbor Housing Commission properties, and kind of comes out to $588,000. So it's really important as folks are kind of talking about what's the next best use for millage dollars going forward, and especially in the city side of things, which you all are connected to. I want to highlight that right now. This is my contact info for anyone who wants to follow up or has other questions or wants to get involved in different ways. I'm more than happy to connect. I'll leave that up and kind of, I'm open to questions or anything else that people are interested in.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Oh, I guess you can leave this question period here.
Sorry, my audio cut out. What was that?
Oh, no worries. You can leave the question period if you'd like and just call on.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think Rosanita. I see.
First of all, thanks for explaining the public safety and mental health millage rebate and what that means, because I know that can get kind of confusing.
Mm-hmm.
My question is about the what's the process to decide how someone ends up in rapid rehousing versus the supportive housing services, and can they move along this I guess along the spectrum, like if they're in rapid rehousing and it finds out they need more, can they move into permanent supportive housing if there's an opening?
I'm not sure the answer to your second part of your question, but for the first part, so there's a coordinated entry meeting, and basically, my understanding, I haven't been involved directly in that part of the process, but there's sort of a matrix that people are screened by a criteria when they call Hawk. And it's, everything from, are they currently living outside, to are you couch surfing? Are you, and there's a scoring system that happens, and that kind of dictates who, how long is your period of homelessness been, those types of things. And that kind of dictates where you're at on what's called the CHIP list, which stands for coordinated housing. I'm not sure what the whole CHIP list acronym means, but the service providers get together once a week, look at that list. It's a by name list, so trying to know people by their name in order to track them as they're throughout that process on who gets housed first at the end of the day. In terms of the difference between rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing, I don't know the answer to that. That might be a question for the county. Thank you. Zachariah?
Thank you again, Scott. I really appreciate the presentation. And I'm very excited about the new developments you're talking about, especially the one on Catherine Street, which is, how many units is it? Over 200?
63. It'd be nice if it was
Oh my
over
gosh,
200.
excuse me.
That's okay.
60.
We have 178 in our pipeline for the next couple of years currently, 63 at Catherine Street. Now, half of those are for folks kind of like we're talking about who most likely are exiting homelessness based on their income level through the coordinated entry process, and half is actually for artists. So this is a project that comes out of Minneapolis called Art Space, where they work to help develop affordable housing that then also can have folks who are not necessarily fully making their income as artists, but are artists living there as well, who also qualify for affordable housing, and in order to kind of have that cultural environment that's inviting and friendly and welcoming to folks throughout that community. So yeah,
Thank you. I can't believe I got the numbers so wrong. If Evelyn can't find enough artists to fill those units, I'm sure you guys have thought of a backup plan. Or are you not concerned about that? I mean, what would happen in that instance?
Art Space, the group that kind of launches these types of projects, is going to be to my knowledge, they're the ones who will fill that tenant list out of local community members, but they have a criteria on how to do that. And
Gotcha.
Because of the town we are in, community we're in, I don't think they'll have a hard time finding it.
Sure. And my question that I want to ask is a pretty broad question, which is, you said that you have, is it okay? How many units in the pipeline? I don't want to get that wrong. 100.
178 that are
78. Okay,
in some
all right.
form of development.
Gotcha. And I think a lot of people are interested in seeing more housing like Avalon in the county, in the city. And so could you tell us from your perspective what the limitations are currently that you're facing? I mean, under what circumstances could you really scale things up?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's a couple pieces. So one is available land and properties. So for example, what the city did recently, looking at all the city-owned properties and lots, surface lots, buildings that were available, that was a big win for just upping the spaces that can be developed by the Housing Commission or us or both. So having the county do that as well, having the townships do that as well, any public entity like that. The university obviously has lots of land. Trying to figure out where that available land is that is desirable and meets our criteria, bus lines and all sorts of things for folks to live in. That's one. The funding is another big piece. The millage, so that not the public safety and mental health millage, but the housing millage that recently got passed a few years ago has been a big boost in just providing the capital for these projects. When we, and same with the Housing Commission, do there's 10 funding streams that it takes to get one of these properties built, and knowing that we can own it and build and have people live there forever. I mean, these are multiple 100-year visions of properties for folks to live in. So the financing is tight always. And so we're braiding different funding streams, local, state, federal, and private, to get that. So capital dollars are a big thing, obviously. And then zoning's a piece of it too, going back to land. So where we can build in the density that we need to make it economically viable to build affordable housing at scale that is going to house enough people to make it feasible and manageable long term. I don't think saying, some of those are already being addressed, but there's probably a lot more that can be done in terms of making certain parts of the city accessible to denser housing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Travis, or council member, Dina.
That's all right. Scott, this is not directly related to your presentation, but since we just had the opportunity to meet him at our council meeting, you guys also just went through a leadership change. And so I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little to that, and if that changes or keeps your organization kind of on the same trajectory, or if you see any major changes coming.
No, I appreciate that. So, as some of you know, Aubrey Patino was the director of Avalon Housing for many years, as the second ever executive director, and on staff for 18, and leading the organization through a lot of growth, especially recently. And she has stepped down, and her replacement is Aaron Cooper, who just started literally a few weeks ago, and Aubrey's still around, kind of overlapping with some coordination and handing off relationships and knowledge. But Aaron comes to us from the Inkster Housing Commission, most recently as their CEO, but prior to that was in leadership positions throughout Ohio, Cleveland, and Toledo area, so major metro public housing areas, organizations. And so he's bringing a sense of scale, especially as Avalon grows, trying to maintain our consistent level of high quality service, regardless of where a tenant is living. We're only growing, so we're only having more tenants, we're only having more staff. We're 125 member staff these days. And so Aaron's bringing kind of a sense of scale that's very helpful for us as we navigate just the challenges of growth and maintaining these older properties, or figuring out what the best use of all of our spaces and functionality are. So yeah, we're excited to have him join the team. Thanks. Yeah, Zachary.
You mentioned earlier the university. It seems like they've had a special role in helping to create this crisis, by bringing more people. From my perspective, I don't want to speak for you, but by bringing more people into the city and not building adequate housing. But you did point out that they have a lot of land, and I was wondering, has Avalon ever come to an agreement with the university to develop certain parcels, or is that in the works perhaps? And if not, are you interested in potentially doing that, and how could we support it?
Yeah, not to my knowledge is the short answer. I think, yeah, we'd be open to it. We're open to it with private individuals who have homes or lots. We're open, we're willing to have the conversation with anybody. We have a pretty strict set of criteria on what we will accept. And then also, because our process and timeline is not fast as a nonprofit affordable housing developer, we have to go through what's known as like the LIHTC process. So low income housing tax credits, which is a very laborious and lengthy process just to get the financing out of the federal government for these properties. We have to have a seller or donor who's willing to work with us on that timeline. So it's hard for us to compete out in the open market, basically. Yeah, but I think, we are in a unique county with, I think this is true, the two closest Division I universities physically in America. And so the student body populations that we have, which are then unfortunately in sort of competition for what other folks who would be at that income level for housing, if those universities aren't keeping pace, which obviously they haven't with their housing stock, it just exacerbates a problem that's already sizable even without the university involvement. Well, thank you all for having me. Again, I'm pretty easy to reach to do more education like this, or for folks who want to volunteer or get involved. We have our own committees, just like this one, to navigate the work that we do. Local advocacy opportunities, state, and federal as well. So I appreciate what you all are doing for renters in our community, and it's great to be here. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, have a good night.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. As he pointed out, you can just send them an email if you have any questions. I've met a number of people from Avalon. They've all been very lovely and very open to discussing anything. So we're lucky to have them here. Okay. We can move on to next item, 7-B, outreach planning / discussion. So presumably, if I remember correctly, this is discussing how we are going to reach out to people. Is this, Julia, I remember you brought this up. Is this regarding to inform people about the work of the commission, or is it about renters' right, trying to inform them about renters' rights?
I was just kind of thinking that it's the start as I'm getting emails about street festivals and stuff, that it's the time of year if we're going to be doing tabling on either one of those issues, it's that we should start thinking about it. So I'm not sure if there's a best way to proceed. Jamie, I don't know if you think we should do this in committee or.
I do think that's how we did it previously. Yeah, so that might be a good idea.
Okay.
So then
yeah, go ahead, Julia.
maybe it's just a call out for anybody who might be interested in doing the tabling or might want to help us prioritize like where and exactly what we're kind of doing. They should come to the committee meeting.
Who will schedule that meeting?
I can do it.
Okay. Thanks, Jamie. I do appreciate that. Yeah, as long as I'm free, I'd love to go there. I think a good set of actions there would be to find opportunities and, like Julia said, prioritize, figure out where would be going, when, who, and what what would we be doing there. I just ordered from our state rep, Representative Morgan, a bunch of new tenants' rights guides, and I'm happy to hand some over to some commissioners. If you ever need any, just email a state legislator and they'll print some off for you. I personally think the state legislature ones are really well made. They're bigger than the city ones, and they have it's pretty easy to use since they have so much space to work with. But I'm happy to pass those off. So, okay. Anything else on this note about outreach planning?
I have a question, Julia. Are you thinking about the art fair? Maybe doing a table during the art fair?
I don't know if the art fair makes the most sense or like top of the park or any of the other things.
I like top of the park.
Yeah, we did, I think, Green Fair in the past too, and that was a really well attended. I mean, art fair gets kind of chaotic. I think it's great to try if we can, or like the Townies party part about art fair, but kind of the slower pace things like Green Fair, I think we get a little bit more contact with folks, but I'm open to trying any of them.
I think we missed the deadline for art fair this year.
Okay. Yeah. I like top of the park. I like that.
Okay. Anything else? on outreach? Okay, so we'll look out for an email, Jamie. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to schedule something. Then we can move on to 7-C, plan for next meeting. So what would we like to have in our agenda for our next meeting?
Election of a new chair.
Yes, that'd be great.
I guess maybe a report from the education committee about what the meeting comes up with about tabling.
Gordon?
Well, we're kind of talking about events. I will just toss this out here. I was hoping to come to this meeting with a date, but I think I've mentioned before that some of us landlords, WHA, Safe House, Ozone, we've all kind of been meeting to try to figure out just how to build community, how to do better with getting folks to understand and take Section 8 and the other programmings that other entities in the city offer. And we are planning a landlord mixer event, hopefully like the last week of April at Corner Brewery, most likely, but we haven't firmed up the date. So I just want to kind of put a plug in that I'll pass that along when I have it. But for anybody listening, just kind of keep an eye out for that announcement. It will just be kind of a connection event to hear a little bit about the process, to hear from other landlords who have had success doing it and who have really enjoyed, and then kind of FAQ session with WHA and some of the other entities. So I think it's gonna be really fun. But just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Rosanita?
Is it possible to get an update for how or I guess how many people the money city council had given to, was it AAHC for the eviction assistance? I don't have it. I know if listen, my screen's not showing. Oh, there he is. Councilmember Radina. I know that Jennifer Hall had mentioned, I think I don't know if it was the last city council meeting or the budget meeting, that you guys that they had released the funds for that, I think separate from the county. Is that right?
I'm trying to think about the exact fund. So I think, are you talking about some of the funds that we allocated from last year's marijuana excise tax revenue?
I don't remember if it was the excise tax revenue or if it was after that. But it was, I just remember there were funds that came in that it was supposed to go to helping with the eviction assistance. And I couldn't remember if it was like one set just with the marijuana funds or if it was two sets of funding releases. But it would be nice to know how many families that helped to keep housed here in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I can check in if it's the same funds that I'm thinking of. My understanding is that we we could have used more, and obviously, and so it's something that we're already talking about as we head into kind of this next budget cycle. And this is a mid-year cycle, so there won't be massive changes to the budget, but particularly those that kind of council allocated. If we want to keep them going, we probably need to allocate them again. And so it's something that we're talking about, and whether or not we can find some additional funds to kind of bolster some of those programs that were really successful in providing some social safety net. And then particularly the stuff that the city is doing, in partnership with the county as well. Obviously, that's a way for us to be able to kind of multiply our impact if we can get the county to come in on it as well. But those programs that we went directly through the Housing Commission on, I believe, my understanding is I think that those funds have largely run out, but we can check and get an update.
Right. I think that, I mean, or maybe it's just an assumption because I'm the weirdo that watches the tenant landlord court cases, but I was just curious because you see Hawk at a lot of those meetings and a lot of people utilizing the funds. And so I was just curious, overall, how many families the city's been able to help. Um, you know, because it is really, really important because we are keeping people from becoming evicted from the apartments that they're living in right now.
Kristen, is that something that we could potentially check in with Jennifer Hall on and up? Thanks.
I think is the program you're referencing, Rosnita, the Rising Hope program?
No, it's not that one. That money was spread out to kind of different entities to help with kind of more supportive services. This one, it helped people pay the back rent that they owed.
I see.
And so the amounts would kind of vary, I think. But I just think that it's something that's really important. And I know at the county level, people like they had allocated even more funding, and I think it was in November, and that one people were waiting to hear like when that started. But I know that Ann Arbor had given quite a bit of money specifically for eviction assistance, and a number of it, were to non-students, I guess I should say. And so I think it'd be good for the Renters Commission to kind of have an idea of where that stands.
Sure. Makes sense. Julia?
Just another non-student thing. Zachariah, I believe in the fall you had talked a little bit about right to counsel. And maybe you could give an update on that at the next meeting or actions you think we might take as a body as you leave.
Sure. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I had a meeting with an attorney from Detroit who was involved in the coalition that got right to counsel in Detroit. And I learned quite a bit about what had happened there and what's applicable and what's not to our situation. So I'd be happy to review my notes from that meeting and kind of give an update and give some suggestions. There was actually something that I'm now thinking of. I don't think this is just to put on our radar. I'm not sure if we should discuss it the next meeting necessarily, but I believe the Intercooperative Council has endorsed the idea of right of first refusal. So if a landlord wants to sell a rental complex, they would have to ask their tenants first if they wanted to apply for a loan and buy it before they could sell to anybody else. And I think the Intercooperative Council was interested in that because in some cases that the tenants can get together and form a co-op instead of that continuing to be a regular landlord-tenant situation. So if the commission ever does investigate that, I would really suggest we talk to the ICC because I believe that is one of their policy proposals, right of first refusal. Anything else for our next meeting? We don't currently have a guest speaker, but I think the ICC probably could talk at the next one, most likely. Okay, Travis?
Thanks. I think that I found what Rosanita was looking for. It's coordinated through the Washington County OCED. And by the looks of it, the last time that we got kind of a report on it was in June of 2023. And so if it's an annual report, we're probably not quite there yet. But we might be able to get an update to date. And it was, I think, a little under a year ago that we allocated $305,000 to the kind of coordinated effort through the county. But it looks like as of June 9th, 2023, for that year, it had been 182 approved requests that went through that were approved. So we might be able to get an update, but I think that's the one you're talking about. And so, Kristen, if that helps point you in that direction.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't remember the name, but that was really helpful. Thank you. It was off the top of my head, so if I had gone back, I would have known, but yeah.
Okay. If you have any ideas for agenda items, just email me, Julia, and Kristen. And we'll add it. Let's move on then to item 8, reports. 8-A, report from City Council. Is there anything you'd like to give us an update on?
Yeah, I think we already got a bit of an update on the updates to the ELO right to renew. Obviously, those went through. I am continuing conversations with our attorneys and Councilmember Harrison on our next ordinance. We are meeting again. We are unfortunately running into the circumstance where folks are out of town at conflicting times, and we're having a little bit of trouble meeting, but we're looking at reconnecting here in the next couple of weeks. But as Zachariah and I pointed out in our last conversation, we are kind of at that time period where fees for the previous year have kind of been paid, and so we've kind of got a little bit of room here before folks are going to start taking on all those pre-tenancy fees again. So we're not kind of up against a deadline here in the next couple of weeks, but obviously we want to continue this process moving as quickly as possible. As it relates to affordable housing, since we've heard a lot about that tonight at our meeting on Monday, it was just this week. Monday, the council approved selling 123 West Summit to the Ann Arbor Housing Commission for additional affordable housing. And so that is kind of just west of Wheeler Park. So hopefully another project moving along there relatively soon. And then we also approved bonding up to $9 million in support of the Catherine Street project. And part of the reason for that is simply because, frankly, how much these development projects cost. And if we weren't able to kind of borrow some of that and bond for it, then the Housing Commission would essentially wrap up all of their existing resources into a single project and wouldn't be able to have multiple things in the pipeline at the same time. So this allows some additional flexibility for the Housing Commission to continue moving forward with other projects that are in the pipeline while continuing to fully fund this project. And so those are a couple of the things we're working on. If there's anything else I can give an update on, we are quickly approaching budget time again for us, and so that will take up a lot of our focus over the next few weeks. So that is likely what you will hear us working on a lot.
Thank you. I have a quick question. The bonding you're referencing, are those the bonds that are backed by the affordable housing millage? Or is this something different? It is, okay. Gotcha.
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I guess I can add one additional thing since we heard about it a little bit tonight. With the public safety and mental health millage coming up for renewal this fall. I know that there's been a lot of discussion in the past about how the city is utilizing our rebate funds. I think it's always important to address that 100% of mental health dollars are going to mental health. The city does not receive a rebate for the mental health portion of that millage. That is 100% going to mental health services. The city receives a rebate for the public safety portion of that millage because we provide our own public safety services. We don't rely on the sheriff for public safety. A previous council had approved what is often kind of referred to as the 40-40-20 plan, where 40% of the resources or 40% of the rebate goes to affordable housing, 40% goes to climate action, and 20% goes to pedestrian and bicycle safety. I will say that as we are approaching renewal, what you will likely see from council is again a kind of resolution promising the voters how we would allocate those dollars if it passes, so that we can be on the record of saying this is how Ann Arbor will spend our rebate dollars. You will likely see changes to that, is what I'm anticipating, because since this passed, as you will likely know, we now have new millages for affordable housing, climate action, and sidewalks. And so we have additional sources of funding for each of those things. I know that I've been part of conversations about potentially utilizing those funds for what would be a more public safety purpose, which would be continuing to bolster unarmed crisis response work, which we know is going to cost more than we currently have allocated if we really want to get a robust program in place. But we also have to recognize the impact that removing some of those funds would have on affordable housing work. And so I think we still have to figure out exactly what that balance would be, and also what we think would be acceptable to voters, because obviously ultimately they have to believe in the vision in order to continue voting for the millage, which is really critical to pass. So just wanted to provide that update, as you will likely hear a lot more as we approach this fall.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay. We can move on to 8-B report from our liaison to HHSAB.
Hello. Yes, actually I had emailed Kristen. I don't have a report. They did not meet this month. Normally they would have met last Thursday, but they their next meeting's not until April, so
Okay.
I have nothing at this time.
Thank you. We can move to 8-C, excuse me, report from staff liaison.
The only item I have to report was about the complaint form that we discussed earlier. So like we discussed, we're hoping to get the complaint form and the guide for the new ordinance changes up online pretty soon. I think we could shoot for tomorrow afternoon, but I think like Tuesday next week is realistic. So that's all I have.
Thank you. 8-D, or do we have any reports from commissioners? Anything we should be aware of? Okay. If anything comes up, you can always send an email to the group. All right, then we will move on to item 9. We don't have any attendees right at the moment. Kristen, should we still go through the public comment process?
I will read the instructions, and then if anybody calls in, we can kind of go back to it. I know that we have several items of communication to get through. So just really briefly, to address the Renters Commission about any topic for up to 3 minutes, you can call 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter a meeting ID 935-8080-1941. You can also join using the Zoom link, and that is a2gov.org/Renters Commission meeting. And to be called on to speak, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 if you're calling, or using the raise hand feature if you are online. So just in case anyone is watching on CTN at home. There are no callers, but I will let you, anybody calls in.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Okay. We'll keep going to our last item, item 10, communication. We had a number of emails here, and I'm trying to think of the best way to go through because I think some of them are things that we probably should discuss. Others, I'm not sure if we really should weigh in, although it's good to be aware of what people are emailing us, of course. Let's see.
I think we could go through each of them and just kind of, I mean, some of them, it seems like the communication that was given to them is sufficient, but some of them, it seems like there are some more suggestions, maybe.
Sounds okay. This one regarding BESTech properties.
Are you looking in order? Is that number? Because number
Yeah,
1 and
I
2
believe
are
it's number
the same kind of issue. And I was wondering if
Yep.
like Ability Partners or Disability Network, because it sounds like maybe I'm unclear because it mentioned like fair housing or disability stuff. I don't know. I wonder if there's a role for them or like dispute resolution center. Or also we can just say we don't have anything to do with it. But I wondered if there was any other resources that I guess I don't know this situation, but I think about a friend who has an autistic son who vocalizes often that's had housing security issues because of the vocalizations and things. And of course, I don't want to assume in this situation, but I just thought that maybe it would be helpful to provide, I don't know, some other suggestions based on, but I'm also open to that not being our role.
Rosanita?
Reading it, I got a little confused on this one because it seemed like there was someone who was complaining, and then they brought another tenant into it, complaining about the other tenant, and then suddenly it was going into the American with Disabilities Act, and I couldn't figure out if it was the original complaining tenant or if it was the tenant who possibly has the disability um, on a different email. Like it was a little confusing.
Yeah, I was also a bit confused about that. Kristen, was there a response given to this tenant?
I can double check. One of them is from February, and I'm sure. I believe they're both communications are from the same person.
Yeah.
And copying renters on their correspondence with their landlord. So I can follow up with them if you have something specific to direct them to. The automatic reply includes the resources on the website. So I could emphasize that, or if you have another thing to share with them.
Yeah, I'll open that up to the group here. Is there a specific suggestion, connection we want to make? Or should we just leave it at the resources that were already sent to them? Okay. All right, well, we do have quite a few of these, so let's just move on to the next one. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is the Beekman property one.
Yeah, is this a WHA issue? I mean, I don't, maybe somebody else can, I don't know who like is the management on the affordable housing side through Beekman or who's coordinating intake, if it's WHA or Housing Commission, but it seems like referral back to whatever that entity is was appropriate for this one.
Yeah. I want to say
I think
that
that's
information. Go ahead, Julie.
I think it's the county.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when somebody had mentioned units last time, Beekman actually came up. So whatever, I think I was looking at WHA, but Kristen could verify that and just give them the resource of, thanks for sharing your issues, but here's who could maybe have some oversight about this.
Yeah. Rosanita?
Well, I mean, it looks like they already emailed someone at the county because it has the person's name. It's not redacted at the top with their email address, and the Washington.org is the county. So
Good
I don't know.
observation. Yeah, it seems like they're connected with the person. They must have just copied us on it. Is that what happens, Kristen, when these come to us?
Often we're copied on it, and I just looked up Karen Newman, and Karen is with Housing and Community Infrastructure, and is a community development specialist with the county. So I think that is a good resource.
Okay. I would be happy just to send an email. I don't know if this is what do you all think about this, but send an email to Karen just to make sure that this person got taken care of. And we might learn something about their processes in the meantime. So unless anyone has an issue with that, I'll just make a note to email Karen. Okay. Thank you. We can move on to the next one. This is, thank you, Kristen, for responding to this one and helping the tenant understand. This was a situation where, was it the lease that was ending because of construction? I had.
Yeah,
Right.
Kristen's
Yeah.
response seemed sufficient to this one to me. I mean, she referred them to
Yeah.
rental housing to do a complaint, and
Yeah.
that seems sufficient.
Yeah, although, from my understanding is the same as yours, Kristen, that I don't think that the ordinance would protect the tenant in this instance since it is construction. But nonetheless, thank you for forwarding them. Okay, this is an email regarding a complex called the Courtyards. They had a waitlist deposit.
So one thing to note is that this, I think for context and for our work, it's a little bit important to explain these situations. So the situations at these corporate high rises are that you've always signed essentially a promise to lease, like even before those became popular. And the reason being because these are corporate high rises, they have different layouts, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, whatever, and they don't know what's going to be available. So they predict based on kind of past experience as to what they think is going to be available. They sign the promises to lease essentially for those, for that number of units. And then often, even prior to all of the recent leasing changes, there was we don't have what you want. You can only have the penthouse and pay more. Or we don't have anything for 4. We're going to have to split you up and put you in 2 and 2. Or we don't have 2 and 2. We're going to put you in 4 and put you in with 2 strangers. So these are individual leases typically that tenants sign. And so the situations of like not being able to offer the space is always and has been a problem that I think I'll be curious if we're able to do waitlist fees and things like that, if that will kind of change that landscape. But just to give kind of the context of this idea of not having what you thought you were going to get available has happened since we've had these corporate high rises because they've always signed not on specific unit 524 bedroom B, they have always just signed on 3-bedroom unit. And if they don't have that, you can't get it. So just to give people some context who aren't in this world, I thought that might be helpful.
Thank you, Jordan, for the context. Rosanita?
When you say corporate high rise, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like the places that are owned by big national companies that have many different units of many different layouts, but like for 3 bedrooms. So thinking taller apartment buildings, sometimes smaller, not necessarily high rises. I guess I should use careful language, but they're more corporate owned buildings. So this will include places like Courtyards, who is kind of a mix in students and some people that live on North Campus, but then also the really traditional, very student geared ones, Landmark, Z Place, 611, Saga, all of those kind of downtown area ones. But there are a couple that are popping up on North Campus to kind of house those students too. Does that help clarify? Or is there further?
I think so. So basically, you can apply, you're looking for a 3 bedroom, you find 2 friends or 2 people who you're like, I can live with them. You
Yeah.
apply together as a group, kind of like you're applying to a dorm, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
And then at their discretion, they're like, well, I know you want a room with them, but we're going to put these 2 together and we're going to put you in the 1 bedroom that costs $1,000 more a month.
Yeah, so there's a couple of kinds of issues. So yeah, you're touching on some of them that I think in this particular place it was just that we didn't have a 3 bedroom apartment available to you, and so we will put you in a 4 bedroom with some other random people. And this is part of the problem is there's this idea of individual leases versus a group lease. And so these are individual leases. So essentially, you're signing for the promise of a bedroom in a specific type of unit and a hope that you will be with your friends. Most of these situations that happened at Courtyard within the last couple of weeks were I signed for a 3 bedroom apartment and they have no 3 bedroom apartments because everybody renewed or whatever the case is. Or, there was a higher level of renewal with 3 bedrooms. And I think we're going to see more renewals with it being a housing crisis. People are more comfortable tolerating a less than perfect unit right now, I think. So we're not seeing as many people moving around as we used to. We definitely have our own highest level of renewals. So I think in this particular scenario, it's the idea that they thought they were going to have an apartment and they didn't get one. And I guess my comment is kind of to say this has always existed. I'm not saying it's right. I've always had a huge problem with how this works. But this particular situation isn't necessarily ordinance related or caused, if that helps people's understandings. Does that make sense? Okay. Julie, I see you have a hand up.
I just want to agree with you. They are kind of unique and different, except that there's a lot of them now. And I do they feel like private dorms to me. It's a suite and you're getting a room as opposed to renting the whole thing. But not returning your application fee, like that language can be cleared up. Like it is a ripoff. And I was just looking again, California has adjusted for inflation. The maximum you can charge is $60 for an application fee. California has way more corporate buildings than we do. And if they can make a profit on $60 there, they can make a profit on $60 here. It doesn't need to be 286.
Totally. And maybe application fee doesn't need to be a stream of profit also, right? Like an application fee could be an application fee. I think in this email, I read multiple issues. One issue of thinking that you had a place for months and not looking and not doing anything else. And the other issue is kind of being split up or having to pay these fees that then, are not refundable. This particular situation seems like maybe have Gail try with them because it sounds like they're students. Maybe have Gail try with them to see if they can get some of that, the application feedback. Morally, I think this is wrong. I don't think that we should be making profits on people's misfortune, right? Like this is a really crappy situation to think. And the problem is that these things have always looked like leases. So with these situations, unlike the promises to lease or the newer kind of iterations that we're seeing, this is you actually are signing a lease, but the lease is just kind of vague. And, maybe John has something to add too, but this is a lease that says you're going to have a shot at a 3 bedroom essentially. And it looks like a real lease. And so I think even versus a promise to lease, this feels more leasey. And so people get even more surprised when these kind of things happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Rosanita?
I know that you're saying it's not just students, but like I'm looking, he's a freshman, right? And assuming going to U of M, when with U of M's, student, the legal service, sorry, the legal services that they offer, can, too bad she's not here because it'd be a question for Gail. Would the university look over something like this before a student signs?
They will. So the students of the university have the option to like take a lease that they are considering signing to student legal services. I think the problem is, this is said in the lease. It says that you're going to have a shot at this apartment. My moral qualm with these has been, it looks like a lease and you think you have a house and then you find out you don't have a home, so it says it in the lease and student legal services will probably say that, but the other thing is like the falling through of this is a much smaller situation than the success of it, right? Like there's lots of people who are going to sign these and they're going to get an apartment with courtyards and it's going to work out just fine. And so the problem is courtyards doesn't think there's any problem because there's only a small number of people that end up being disappointed, hurt, at the end. But if we've now kind of set the renewal timelines. I mean, I guess I'm curious to see how, with our new renewal/response timeline combined with whatever fee bill is coming out, I'm curious to see how that addresses this type of situation. So, not to minimize this suffering, this is really, really bad and really unfortunate and feels really crappy when you're on the receiving end of this. But I guess to say for our work from the Renters Commission, I'm open to other feedback or pushback on this. It feels like we are setting things up for next year to address some of this potentially, maybe.
Makes sense. Julia, was your hand still up? Or was that just from running?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify real quick that student legal services is a prepaid student legal aid plan, and it is not a university program.
Do you I guess I'm not sure exactly what you're like, it's included with your tuition, you just go to them. It's every student has access to student legal services.
Right, but the University of Michigan does not run it. It exists because students vote every year to say, yes, we want to buy into this program, and it's part of their student fees.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying. You're not saying that an individual student has to choose to buy in. Okay. Yes, I get what you're saying. That makes sense.
I don't think they make any votes anymore. I think it just keeps happening. And I think that if I'm not mistaken, there's like a student fee for student government and there's a student fee for student legal services that's just assessed no matter what. I don't even think it's put up to a vote anymore. Okay. We have a few more of these, so let's keep going. Anyone have any comments, questions about this email about Pine Valley Apartments? Jamie?
Just a quick comment. I think there was a section of that email that was missed in the redaction, so maybe if we could avoid putting that on the screen, just to protect privacy. But I don't have any comments in relation to the content. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I'm looking. Oh yeah. You're right. Thanks. Julia?
I don't remember if Kristen, you had responded on this one. I mean, roaches are hard, but if it's really bad, the building inspector can cite them for it.
I did not provide that information, but I can if.
But it can't be the typical roaches. Well, I saw 6 when I turned my lights off. It's got to be like, oh man, those are everywhere. Because how else would the inspector see them?
Yeah, this is a complicated situation. Okay, Jeff.
The only thing I could think of on there is the option. I know it takes some effort, but to do the whole rent escrow if there's an unlivable condition, and medically and sanitation wise, I mean, that would be I think that would apply if the situation's not being taken care of.
Thanks. Rosanita.
That's the one though where they had someone living with them who wasn't on the lease, correct? And now the landlord, I mean, even if it's retaliatory, the problem is still there that they had someone on the lease. I mean, living in the apartment who wasn't on the lease, which means that they did break the lease terms, right?
Yep.
Either way, we as the renters commission don't provide legal counsel, so we can't accompany them to their meeting anyway.
Right. I think it might be best to send them the list of resources. Julia.
I mean, what Rosanita says, right? We can't really help them, but the fact that they violated one of the lease terms by having an additional person does not negate any of their rights. The landlord can give them a 30-day notice and they can comply and get back with the lease. But yeah, there's not anything more we can do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would just suggest this person consider going to legal services of South Central Michigan if they are eligible.
Yep, I was just going to say that, and I think the situation is actually resolved. I think potentially, but
Okay.
let's not spend too much time on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's keep moving on here. There was an email. Let me see. To Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. I think the initial email didn't actually, there was a missing S in the email, so I don't think the initial one hit your inbox. But I replied to you guys. So this was a person who was reaching out on behalf of their daughter, I believe, who's a student, who, along with a number of other students, was looking at renting a house that is being managed by Oxford. And they put down a security deposit and application fee, and then were notified that at the kind of that last date allowed that the current tenants were renewing their lease. And so they reached out to us. It looks like pretty immediately. If you scroll back up to the date of the initial email there, I think. Yeah, so reached out to us on the 14th. So within kind of 3 days of that initial process starting, I reached out directly to Oxford on this one and got a response. And so it looks like basically what happened was the timeline, the existing tenants had notified Oxford that they were renewing. The very next business day, they contacted them to let them know that it wasn't available. And my understanding is they initially offered a few other alternatives, and when those weren't similar to kind of what was described earlier with some of the bigger places that have multiple units that they can offer. Even though this was a house, they offered some other properties that might be similar and might meet the criteria. And when those weren't deemed acceptable, it looks like actually on the day that we were emailed, Oxford had already had already sent out a 100% refund. And so kind of within 3 days there. And so it seems like this one should be resolved. Obviously, pretty exorbitant fees there that are being mentioned, kind of the security deposit down, despite the fact that it wasn't guaranteed yet. Things like that it's a lot of money to be down, which is what we're working to address right now. But ultimately, it does seem like this has been fully refunded at this point. She also the original email also mentioned something about kind of this being kind of a profit-making operation for Oxford. And Oxford noted in that first bullet point that when they take in these funds, that they're maintained in a zero interest security deposit account required by law. So they are claiming that they don't make any money off of these transactions. That it's truly just being held in a zero interest account. But so anyway, at this point, I think that this one should be resolved, but obviously the circumstances there might be worth discussing more. And then obviously, you can see for yourselves at the end there that this is something we regularly hear from some of the property management folks, that that some of this kind of last minute March being a late time for somebody to kind of start this process over, they believe as a result of the new timelines around early leasing ordinance. So something for us to continue to keep an eye on. Obviously, I continue to believe that the market hasn't fully reset itself yet, because we had so many loopholes that were being utilized by landlords to get around the law. But it's something we may want to continue to keep our eyes on moving forward, so that, if we continue to hear from more renters that maybe this timeline isn't working, that maybe we adjust it by 30 days or something like that. But just something to keep our eyes on in the future. As of right now, I am only hearing that from landlords, and so that's not enough for me to say that we've proven there that this timeline isn't working.
Thank you. Jordan?
Be mindful of time, but I just want to put a quick, this just shows how we have to address these fees, right? Like I read what you're reading, Travis, but like the idea that people have thousands of money, thousands of dollars of money in one place traps them. They can't look for anything else. They can't get on any other wait list. There's zero option. And it just feels like a very destructive and abusive relationship, because a lot of these students don't have this kind of money. Obviously the things that were in the news with campus management and Prime with, $6,000 for two people. Like there's no way I could have ever come up with anything like that as a tenant myself. And it just limits people and locks them into one option that there's a good chance they're not going to get. So I think to me, it seems to be important that we continue to focus on that piece. And not the like, oh, it got refunded and oh, it was quick. And that's not the part that's the really horrible part about all of this.
I 100% agree with that. And I think, we're obviously working to address that with the ordinance that will be coming. So so that is the piece that we are working to address. Yep.
Yeah. Jamie?
Yeah, just a quick comment. It also doesn't seem clear from the emails that the landlord made any type of statement to say, like, I don't know. It just, it seems a little misleading to me, and I could see why someone who's paying that much money would think that that means that they've secured a place to live. So, obviously the burden is kind of on both the renter as well, but it's a little disturbing.
Yeah, and I was not provided any communications from either of them about like what what the actual dialogue between the two were. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely. If I'm putting that much money down on something, my expectation is that I have something locked in. And I think what I don't know is like what was in the fine print of those original communications, right? And so that's something that we should keep our eyes on as well.
Yeah. Julia?
Sorry. I've been a bookkeeper for a nonprofit developer, landlord, and I still can't understand why a lot of Ann Arbor landlords want to do this. Like, if it's really going into a zero interest account, you're spending all this time cashing and writing checks on somebody who 8 months down the road, in November they took the money. Like
They usually keep a portion is the money piece, Julia. I mean, from my understanding, I don't know this, I can't speak to this explicit example, but if they're charging 150 for a background or a application fee, and then they keep 5 times 150 on this lease, the whatever they're doing with that money, background check, whatever, application, putting it in, administrative, is a very small piece of that 150. So even though they're giving some of this deposit back, they're usually keeping a part. So it's become a stream of revenue, a stream of profit for people.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So in this particular case, they at least say that 100%, both the deposit and the application were 100% refunded. But I also have heard, I mean, I think I sat down a few weeks ago now with Washington Area Department Association, but also just in conversations I've had with landlords in the past. I think exactly what has been mentioned here, which is like this does lock people in. And I think what we regularly hear is if we get rid of these fees, then the tenants have no teeth, like no skin in the game. Like there's nothing so they're going to apply to every single apartment in the city of Ann Arbor. And then we're going to think we're full. And then we actually don't have any tenants because they've all signed somewhere else. And that's the argument on the other side. I don't necessarily believe that will be the case, considering that there aren't a ton of vacancies all over town. But that is the argument about why they would do this. I certainly don't think that, even if that were the case, it strikes me as a little odd that they would need to take in this amount of money in order to do that. But that has been the argument that I have consistently heard.
And it's just, I'm sorry, it just feels like BS. The vacancy rate is not 10%. The vacancy rate is beneath 3%, and which is smaller than what the National Apartment Association says it should be. So it just feels like they're making all this up.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks, Travis. Jeff? And then we should keep moving on here.
Yeah, I would say I find it disingenuous that they express so much concern about the plight of renters, and then are willing to lock them in to that with that level of fund. I can't buy that as a reason. I just can't.
Yeah, when I see that, I always I privately call that like a ventriloquist act, because they always are telling us what the tenants are actually saying, but then I don't never hear these things from tenants. I just before we move on, I just want to say I thought it was interesting that they said that signing 150 days, so that's 5 months before the end of a lease, is like the last minute. They said that with tenants waiting to the last minute to sign, and that's 5 months from the end of your lease. You're just over the halfway point in a year-long lease. I think that's very telling that to them that's the last minute. But let's keep going on.
Yeah, that was maybe my narrator putting it. Like, I think it was like the last day that was allowed under the law for them to say that they were renewing. So that's what they meant by kind of the last minute.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah. In my conversation, it was the end of that period where it was the very end of when they could say that they were renewing.
Right. Okay. We should go somewhat quickly here, I think, since it's getting late, but something very similar. This was from Oxford, also about an application fee and then a deposit fee, which I don't believe any law requires them to treat the deposit like a security deposit, since these are not considered to be security deposits, is my understanding. So they could put it in an interest account, which I'm not.
I think that this might be the same address.
Is this the same one?
Same house, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same house. So it
Okay,
might have
I
been a
didn't
different
realize
person,
that.
same house.
Gotcha. Thanks. Okay, then we'll keep moving on. Okay, this is varsity management this time. Same thing. It's a $500 reservation fee on top of the $150 application fee. So that's $650 before you would even put down a security deposit. Yeah, I've seen that actually. I don't think there's anything new in this one. Jeff, I see your hands up. Is that just from earlier? Yeah, it looks like it. Okay. No worries.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all. Okay. Anything else on the waitlist fee emails? Okay. I think we're on the same page about this being a problem. Okay. This one was from a member of Central Student Government at U of M. I'm happy to reach out to them. I have been talking with some members of that organization. Great. And we did receive an email, I think the last meeting, we talked about it from Jewish Family Services. I have not yet reached out to them, but I'm planning on doing that probably tomorrow. Okay. Any other comments, questions about the communications, or are we good to move on? Okay, we'll move on to item 11, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Motion by Rosanita. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Great. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.